She was 24 when the world decided she was America's next sweetheart. The face that launched perfume lines, fashion spreads, and teary Oscar montages. Everyone loved her. The girl with the dimples, the self-deprecating laugh, the one who called her fans my family. Her real name didn't matter anymore. She was an idea, a brand wrapped in glitter and interviews. The red carpets were her habitat, and the flashbulbs were her heartbeat. Yet behind that smile was something volatile, something that waited for the moment when the spotlight turned away. Her trouble began in whispers, a missed press event, an apology from her manager citing exhaustion, a shaky appearance on late-night television where her laughter came too loud, too delayed. Her friends said she was drinking too much. Her studio handlers quietly arranged private rehab that never happened. The industry still protected her. They always protect the bankable ones, until they don't. That summer she wrapped filming on a romantic comedy. The production crew described her as distracted, her eyes glazed between takes, disappearing into her trailer for hours. A stunt driver later said she insisted on driving her own scenes, ignoring safety instructions. When the director objected, she walked off set barefoot, muttering that no one understood what it was like to live on camera. The tabloids reported tension. Fans dismissed it as media exaggeration, but those closest to her saw a different story unfolding, one that couldn't be edited into a blooper reel. The night of her arrest started like many others, dinner at a West Hollywood restaurant, paparazzi stationed like vultures, the actress wrapped in designer silk and feigned calm. She smiled for the cameras as she left, blowing kisses, stepping into her black Mercedes. The photos from that moment would later circulate online, her last free smile before everything snapped. Minutes later, witnesses reported the car swerving on Sunset Boulevard, headlights cutting erratically through traffic. A security camera caught the flash of her vehicle jumping a curb, clipping a mailbox, narrowly missing a pedestrian. When police pulled her over, the scene was already cinematic. Blue lights reflecting off chrome, her hands gripping the wheel, eyes glassy. The officer's body cam footage leaked months later. Her voice trembled as she denied drinking, slurred protests tumbling into pleas. She refused the breathalyzer. When they asked her to step out, she stumbled, clutching the car door for balance. Then came the clicking sound that would rewrite her public story, handcuffs locking around her wrists. She was booked for DUI, reckless endangerment, and resisting arrest. At the precinct she cried. The mugshot went viral within hours. The same face that once sold magazines now decorated front pages under headlines like, "From Glamour to Ground Zero." The following morning, studio executives held emergency calls. The upcoming film's release was postponed, endorsement contracts suspended, a fragrance deal terminated. The internet oscillated between pity and cruelty. Fans trended hashtags begging for her redemption arc. Others wrote she got what she deserved. The actress herself said nothing. She posted bail, left the jail with oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes, and disappeared into a friend's mansion in the hills. The investigation revealed a cocktail of alcohol and prescription medication in her system. It wasn't her first time stopped by police. Records showed 2 prior warnings for erratic driving. TMZ uncovered reports of late-night fights with her boyfriend, unpaid rehab stints, and an incident where she allegedly threw a phone at a hotel concierge. The narrative was complete. The angel had fallen and the world wanted to watch the crash in slow motion. Her lawyer claimed the event was a cry for help. Court documents painted a woman unraveling under the pressure of fame, childhood trauma, insomnia, isolation. Her family released a statement asking for privacy, but the public was merciless. Every talk show, podcast, and YouTube commentator turned her life into a morality play. Even her peers avoided her. A co-star described her as radioactive. The studios quietly cut ties, labeling her uninsurable. When the trial began, she appeared in a simple black suit, hair tied back, eyes fixed on the floor. The prosecutor outlined the case clinically. A woman who had every privilege, every opportunity, and still endangered lives. Her defense attorney countered with emotional appeals, mental health struggles, over-medication, exhaustion. The judge listened in silence. Then came the verdict. Guilty of misdemeanor, DUI, probation, mandatory counseling, a suspended license, and 48 hours in county jail. The sentence was light by legal standards, but heavy in public humiliation. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. She whispered, "I'm sorry," before disappearing into a waiting car. Her 48 hours behind bars became tabloid legend. She later described them as the quietest hours of her life. Fluorescent lights humming, the metal cot beneath her shoulder blades, the sound of distant sobbing echoing through concrete halls. There were no cameras, no fans, no publicists. Just the truth. She was alone, stripped of her name, wearing the same orange as everyone else. When released, she looked dazed, clutching a small bag of personal items, face pale and fragile. The photos from that morning showed a ghost of her former self. She retreated from Hollywood for nearly a year. Rehab followed, then silence. When she resurfaced, it was in a carefully crafted interview for a major magazine. She spoke about accountability, the illusion of control, and the toxic culture of celebrity. But some readers said it sounded scripted, a redemption attempt approved by PR. Others believed her. "I thought fame would fix the emptiness," she said. It only made it louder. Her comeback attempts never fully landed. Independent directors were hesitant. Big studios avoided her entirely. She made a brief appearance in a streaming drama. Critically praised, barely watched. Then she vanished again. Years later, she became an advocate for mental health awareness, working with recovery programs, speaking quietly at events no camera crew attended. She wasn't the girl on billboards anymore, but maybe that was the point. And yet, whenever her name trends again, usually when another celebrity spirals, people post her mugshot. The image has become mythic, a cautionary emblem. Some fans romanticize it, framing her downfall as tragic poetry. Others treat it like a punchline. But those close to her know the truth. It was real, raw, human. The girl who once twirled in designer gowns now walks her dog through quiet neighborhoods. Head down, no makeup, just another woman trying to stay sober. Behind every red carpet there's a shadow waiting. For some, it's envy or loneliness. For her, it was the whisper that she wasn't enough, that without applause, she would disappear. The irony was cruel. She only found peace when she finally did disappear. Her story still circulates in Hollywood as a warning whispered between agents and new faces. Don't become her. But the truth is, she was never just her mistakes. She was what happens when a person becomes an image, and then gets arrested for being human. She was born into fame's periphery, the daughter of a stage actress and a producer who could open any door in Los Angeles with a single phone call. By her early 20s, she was the one standing under the flash of strobes at every premiere, a familiar figure in gowns that shimmered like liquid gold. Her smile was rehearsed perfection. She had already survived the gossip columns once, after a public breakup, after a rumor of addiction, but she carried herself like it all slid off her skin. What no one knew was that her life had become a series of controlled performances, a balancing act between the image she built and the chaos waiting just behind it. The first cracks showed during filming on a high-budget action thriller. Crew members whispered about her erratic mood swings, her tendency to vanish from set for hours. At first, the studio shielded her, saying she was method acting, immersing herself in the role of a woman under pressure. But when the director found her crying in her trailer, clutching a half-empty bottle of pills, he realized the method was real. She brushed it off, joked that she was fine, just a little tired, then walked back on set and hit her mark like nothing happened. By the end of that year, the tabloids had caught scent of something darker. Photos appeared of her leaving a nightclub at dawn, makeup smeared, eyes hollow. Her publicist spun it as a late rap party. The studio lined up another press tour, hoping to bury the rumors under promotional smiles. She tried to comply, smiling through morning shows, reading cue cards, but behind closed doors she was losing her grip. The loneliness of celebrity, the constant surveillance, the men who called her by her movie name instead of her own, it all began to corrode her. The night everything collapsed, she was supposed to attend a charity gala at the Beverly Hilton. Instead, she showed up hours late, visibly intoxicated, clinging to a friend who looked terrified. Witnesses said she argued with the event's organizers, demanding her name be moved to the top of the guest list. When security tried to escort her outside to calm down, she slapped one of them across the face. Within minutes, the police were called. Cell phone footage captured her shouting, trying to walk away as the officers arrived. Her designer heels clattered against the marble floor. Then, the quiet metallic sound that would haunt her forever. Handcuffs tightening around her wrists while flashes from photographers lit the hotel lobby like lightning. The arrest report was clinical: misdemeanor battery, public intoxication, resisting arrest. But the photos told the real story. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her lips trembling as officers led her past the red carpet backdrop still set up from earlier. The next morning, every entertainment outlet carried the headline, "Golden Girl Gone Rogue." Her mugshot, eyes red, expression dazed, was plastered on news feeds worldwide. The investigation was quick. Security footage showed her throwing a drink at a staff member and pushing a police officer. The prosecutor offered a deal: anger management classes, probation, community service. Her lawyer advised her to accept, but she wanted to fight it. She told friends she couldn't be the girl who hit a cop. What she didn't realize was that the battle wasn't in the courtroom. It was in public opinion, and she'd already lost. Her trial drew small crowds outside the courthouse, fans holding signs that read, "We still believe in you." Inside, she sat stiff, eyes downcast, her lawyer speaking for her. The prosecution played video clips, each one eroding the image she'd spent years crafting. When the judge asked if she wanted to address the court, she whispered an apology so quiet the stenographer had to ask her to repeat it. The verdict was lenient: guilty, probation, a fine, 30 days of community service. But the real punishment was invisible. The studio canceled her next film. Her endorsement deals vanished. Directors stopped returning calls. In the months that followed, she tried to rebuild. She enrolled in anger management therapy, attended recovery meetings, and posted carefully staged Instagram photos of sunsets and self-care quotes. But Hollywood is a place that forgives scandal only when it sells tickets. Without box office heat, she was just another cautionary tale. Her friends noticed her growing isolation. She stopped answering messages, stopped showing up at industry events. One paparazzo later said he followed her for 3 days and didn't see her leave her apartment once. When she finally reappeared, it was in a streaming drama filmed in Vancouver, far from Los Angeles. The role was small, a single mother nurse struggling with addiction, but she played it with an aching realism that critics couldn't ignore. Some called it a comeback, others dismissed it as typecasting, but those who watched closely saw the truth. She wasn't acting anymore. She was telling her own story frame by frame. Still, the world refused to let her past die. Every interview circled back to the incident. Every article mentioned the slap before the film. She tried to laugh it off, but her eyes betrayed her. The shame clung like a scar you couldn't cover. She told one journalist, "People think one night defines you. But that night didn't make me who I am. It revealed who I was becoming." It was a moment of clarity, but by then, her name was already shorthand for downfall. She moved north after that, bought a small house near Lake Arrowhead, traded couture for sweaters, flashbulbs for quiet mornings. Locals said she blended in, shopping at grocery stores, walking her dog. A far cry from the girl who once graced Vanity Fair covers. Every so often, she would drive down to LA for a reading or a small audition, but the industry rarely called back. Still, there were whispers of her generosity. Anonymous donations to women's shelters, handwritten letters to young actors warning them about the seduction of fame. In private moments, she admitted that the night of her arrest was both her destruction and her salvation. "I was begging someone to stop me," she told a close friend years later. "It just happened to be the police." There was no bitterness in her voice, only recognition. She said she finally understood that fame doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes piece by piece until you forget what normal feels like. Now, her name surfaces once a year, usually when tabloids make "Where are they now?" lists. The photos are grainy, her hair tied back, carrying groceries, smiling at someone just out of frame. There are no designer gowns, no entourage, just a woman who once lived her life in headlines and now lives it quietly. The red carpet feels like another lifetime, a costume she outgrew, and yet she knows it will never completely let her go. There will always be that one photo, that one night frozen in digital memory, the proof that even Hollywood's brightest stars can stumble straight into the dark. She doesn't read the comments anymore. When strangers recognize her, they sometimes mention her old films, never the arrest. But every time she hears a police siren in the distance, she pauses, just a second too long. It's a reflex she'll probably carry forever. Fame had given her everything and then taken everything back. What remained was something smaller, quieter, but real. Not the perfect smile, not the gilded image, just a woman who once stood on a red carpet and later stood in a courtroom. Both times under lights she couldn't control. She grew up watching her mother put on makeup before auditions, memorizing the way she transformed herself in the mirror. Lipstick, mascara, poise. She promised herself she would never need to transform like that, never hide behind anything. By the time she turned 18, Hollywood had already called. A breakout role in a teenage comedy turned her into a household name overnight. Her smile was printed on lunchboxes, billboards, and teenage bedroom posters. Reporters called her the new face of innocence. But innocence doesn't sell forever. By 26, the roles had changed. The ingenue was replaced by darker scripts, troubled women, addicts, criminals. She liked those parts, the honesty of them. What she didn't realize was how easily she was starting to blur the line between character and self. Long nights became longer mornings. She told friends she was just method acting, but her apartment smelled like whiskey and the blinds stayed closed. The tabloids noticed first. Photos of her leaving bars barefoot, her hair tangled, a cigarette trembling between her fingers. When her agent called, she said she was fine. Everyone says that in Hollywood right before they're not. The crash happened on a quiet Tuesday. She had just left a studio dinner, her white Range Rover slicing through the Hollywood hills. A few blocks from Laurel Canyon, she lost control. The car slammed into two parked vehicles, sending debris across the street. Witnesses said she got out barefoot, disoriented, mumbling apologies. A passerby called the police. When they arrived, she tried to convince them she was just tired, that she could walk home. But when they asked her to take a sobriety test, she refused. One officer later testified that she smelled strongly of alcohol and prescription medication. When she realized she wasn't going to talk her way out of it, something inside her snapped. She cursed, stumbled backward, tried to get into her car again. The officers grabbed her arm and she fought them, weakly, desperately, like someone fighting to hold on to a version of themselves that was already gone. The body cam footage, which would later leak online, showed her shouting, "Do you know who I am?" as they led her to the patrol car. At the station, the mugshot was taken, eyes glassy, hair disheveled, mascara running. Within hours, the image spread everywhere. Overnight, she wasn't an actress anymore. She was a symbol. Morning shows replayed the video, commentators shaking their heads. Memes appeared. Every talk show made the same joke, from red carpet to holding cell. The investigation was routine. DUI, resisting arrest, property damage, but the media turned it into spectacle. Paparazzi swarmed the courthouse. Old co-stars gave pitying interviews. Her parents released a short statement. "We love our daughter and ask for privacy." The studio canceled her latest project, and her agent stopped answering calls. She had gone from Hollywood's next big thing to uninsurable. In court, she stood beside her lawyer, face pale under the fluorescent lights. The prosecutor outlined her actions. Her lawyer countered with an explanation: exhaustion, overmedication, untreated anxiety. The judge gave her a suspended sentence, probation, fines, and mandatory counseling. It wasn't harsh, but it was enough to shatter what was left of her career. Outside, the cameras waited. She kept her eyes down and whispered, "I'm sorry," but no one seemed to care. She entered rehab quietly a week later, far from Los Angeles. The tabloids followed anyway, reporting when she cried during group sessions, when she tried to leave early, when she came back. A therapist later said she was one of the loneliest people he'd ever met. She didn't know who she was when the cameras weren't on, he said. She thought her name was a mask she had to keep wearing. After 90 days, she left the facility sober but fragile. She tried to rebuild, signing onto a small independent film. It flopped, but critics praised her raw performance. "There's pain in her eyes that no acting class can teach," one reviewer wrote. But Hollywood doesn't reward pain, it consumes it. By the time she tried to get another role, casting directors had already moved on. The public had too. When she posted on social media, comments were brutal. Some fans begged for her comeback. Others mocked her. She deleted everything. For a while, she disappeared entirely. No sightings, no interviews, no updates. People assumed the worst. But she was living quietly in Santa Fe, volunteering at a local theater, teaching acting classes to teenagers who still believed in dreams. She rarely talked about her arrest, but when she did, she described it as the night the performance ended. "I thought I could control the story," she told a friend, "but stories control you." She no longer went to Hollywood parties or award shows. Fame had become like a former lover she couldn't bear to see again. Years passed. A documentary crew reached out wanting to tell her story, to frame her as a redemption arc. She refused. "Redemption isn't entertainment," she said. "It's work." Quiet work. Still, her name occasionally resurfaced in nostalgia articles, lumped with others who had fallen from grace. The same mugshot always appeared, a frozen reminder of the worst night of her life. She eventually sold her Los Angeles house. Neighbors said she left before dawn. No movers, just her and a small U-Haul. She drove east, her old life fading in the rearview mirror. In interviews, directors who had once worked with her spoke kindly, calling her brilliant but fragile. But no one could quite place where she'd gone. Sometimes a photo would surface, her at a cafe in New Mexico, hair shorter, eyes softer, smiling at something off camera. She no longer looked like the girl on the posters. She looked real, ordinary, free. Every so often she gets letters from fans who say her downfall helped them feel less alone. She reads each one carefully. She knows now that the version of her the world adored was never real. The real woman was the one who stood barefoot on the asphalt that night, trembling under flashing red and blue lights, realizing that fame couldn't save her from herself. She never returned to the red carpet. She didn't need to. She'd already learned what most never do, that the same spotlight that warms you can burn you alive. The world remembers her for her fall, but somewhere in the quiet desert, far from cameras, she found something Hollywood never gave her: peace. She was the kind of actress people described as graceful, the sort who could walk into a room and make the air shift. She came from old money, old studios, old Hollywood, a lineage of names etched into plaques along Vine Street. From her first appearance at 19, she was framed as the embodiment of poise. Paparazzi loved her. Brands adored her. There was something timeless about her, they said. The kind of woman who could have been a star in any decade, but perfection is exhausting. Her world was an endless carousel of premieres, fittings, scripts, interviews, and polite smiles. She wasn't wild, not the way some of her peers were. She drank wine, not vodka. She kept her scandals small, missed flights, whispered affairs, the kind of gossip publicists can bury in a day. To the outside world, she seemed untouchable. Until one afternoon, she walked into a high-end department store and made a mistake that would define her more than any film ever did. It started as a simple errand, something she'd done countless times before. The cameras outside the boutique barely glanced her way. She'd been there dozens of times. A few dresses caught her eye, silk, Italian, outrageously expensive. She smiled at the sales associate, asked for privacy, and disappeared into the changing room. Minutes passed. Then 20. Then 40. When she finally emerged, she was wearing sunglasses, her hair tucked under a hat. Security noticed her slipping garments into her oversized tote bag. They hesitated. Was this really happening? One of the most recognized faces in Hollywood stealing? They decided it must be a misunderstanding, until the store alarm sounded. Witnesses later said she froze, as if waiting for someone to yell, "Cut!" The sound of the alarm echoed through the marble halls, and everyone turned to look at her. For a moment she looked small, confused, humiliated. Security approached gently, still half believing it was some bizarre publicity stunt. But when the police arrived, the truth became undeniable. The officers were polite, almost apologetic, but procedure is procedure. They handcuffed her, guided her out the back entrance to avoid the crowd. The footage leaked anyway. Within hours, her name was everywhere. Movie star arrested for shoplifting. The public reaction was disbelief, then mockery. Memes appeared, headlines like "From Dior to Detention." Her lawyer insisted it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been distracted, that she had intended to pay later. The store's surveillance footage told another story: deliberate concealment, a look over the shoulder, a quick exit. She was charged with grand theft. The items totaled over $5,000. For most people, it would have meant a serious sentence. For her, it became a global spectacle. The courtroom was filled with cameras. She wore conservative black, minimal makeup, and a look of quiet shame. The prosecutor was firm but not cruel. The defense argued stress, exhaustion, possible medication side effects. Her therapist testified about depression, isolation, and compulsive behavior. The judge sentenced her to community service and probation. No jail time, but the humiliation was enough. She spent her service hours sorting clothes at a thrift store downtown. Journalists followed her there, snapping pictures as she folded donated jeans and carried boxes. One reporter noted that she looked eerily calm. Later, she said those weeks were the first time she'd felt human in years. "No cameras, no scripts, just people who didn't care who I was," she told a friend. But Hollywood wasn't so forgiving. Endorsements vanished overnight. The studio dropped her from an upcoming period drama. Former colleagues spoke of her fragile state, as though she were a ghost haunting her own legacy. Directors stopped calling. Even charity galas rescinded invitations. The same red carpets that once glowed for her now turned away. In interviews, she tried to explain. It wasn't about the clothes, she said. It was about control. I wanted to feel something real. The words were honest, maybe too honest. The public didn't know what to do with that kind of vulnerability. They wanted villains, not confessions. The more she tried to explain herself, the deeper the ridicule cut. Comedians made sketches. Talk shows replayed the arrest footage with laughter. Somewhere along the line, she stopped talking altogether. A year later, a journalist tracked her down to a quiet house near Santa Barbara. She was gardening when they found her, her hands dirt-stained, wearing a sun hat instead of diamonds. She declined a formal interview but spoke briefly, softly.
"People think falling from grace is loud," she said.
It's not. It's silence. It's the phone not ringing. She spent the next decade in partial exile. There were no new movies, no public appearances. Occasionally, she appeared at charity events for mental health awareness, usually unannounced. The woman who once dazzled audiences with elegance now stood quietly among volunteers, folding flyers, avoiding cameras. Those who met her described her as kind, self-contained, haunted. The irony was cruel. She could have afforded everything she stole 1,000 times over. But that wasn't the point. Fame had given her everything except meaning. The theft was never about possession. It was about rebellion, against an image, a system, a life where every gesture was rehearsed. "For 5 minutes," she once said, "I felt invisible, and that felt like freedom." Years later, a streaming documentary included her story in a series about Hollywood's lost icons. She refused to participate but allowed her name to be used. When the episode aired, younger viewers expressed sympathy. They saw not a thief but a woman suffocating under the weight of perfection. Older generations remained divided. Some saw her as a cautionary tale, others as a tragedy. Today, she lives quietly, her fame reduced to a handful of internet clips and magazine archives. Sometimes she's seen in small cafes, signing autographs for older fans who remember the films that once made her immortal. They tell her she was their favorite, that she should come back. She smiles, thanks them, but never answers. When she walks away, she moves with the same grace that once captivated millions, but now it's softer, slower, stripped of pretense. The kind of grace that comes from having nothing left to prove. She doesn't fear cameras anymore, because no one follows her. And that, she says, is the real luxury, the kind money, fame, or stolen silk could never buy. Sometimes late at night, she still dreams of that alarm. The metallic beep echoing down polished floors, the sound that ended her career. But in her dreams, she doesn't flinch. She turns toward it. Because in that sound, she finally hears the truth. The world stopped pretending she was perfect, and in that moment, she finally stopped pretending too. She was born into brightness. Cameras had always been a part of her life. From a young age, she had that unmistakable charisma, the kind that made casting agents lean forward, the kind that made magazines call her the next big thing. By 24, she'd worked with A-list directors, graced luxury brand campaigns, and had a face recognizable from airport billboards to teenage bedroom posters. She had everything: fame, fortune, beauty, and a secret addiction that would destroy it all. On screen, she was magnetic. Off screen, she was chaos barely concealed under designer sunglasses. For years, rumors of wild parties and erratic behavior swirled around her, but her team always managed to contain the damage. There were exhaustion statements, nervous breakdowns, misunderstood moments. Hollywood is good at rewriting reality when the star still sells tickets. But when her last film flopped, when her name stopped drawing box office numbers, the whispers became headlines. And that's when her spiral began. It started with late-night drives down Sunset, paparazzi catching her running red lights, her face pale, eyes unfocused. She'd disappear for weeks, then resurface in glittering gowns on red carpets, pretending everything was fine. Insiders said she'd lost control of her money, her friends, and her choices. She'd been in and out of rehab twice, though she always denied it. Her mother, once her biggest supporter, stopped showing up at premieres. "She's not my daughter right now," she told a reporter quietly. "She's someone else." Then came the night that changed everything. A police patrol spotted her car speeding through Beverly Hills, weaving dangerously across lanes. They signaled her to stop. Instead, she accelerated. The chase was brief but reckless, through intersections, past startled drivers, finally ending when she crashed into a hedge outside a luxury hotel. Officers approached, and when they opened the car door, the smell of alcohol hit them immediately. Inside, they found prescription pills scattered across the seat and a small bag of white powder tucked into the console. She looked dazed, confused, barely aware of what had happened. Her first words were, "Please don't tell anyone." But of course everyone found out. The arrest video spread online within hours. Her mugshot, smeared makeup, eyes vacant, became one of the most shared images of the year. It was a devastating contrast to the glamorous red carpet photos that once defined her. The tabloids tore her apart. Talk shows joked about her downfall. Fans who had once adored her now watched her unravel with morbid fascination. At her arraignment, she tried to look composed. Her lawyer pleaded not guilty, arguing emotional distress, substance dependency, and the need for rehabilitation rather than punishment. The judge was less forgiving. She'd been given second chances before. This time, she was sentenced to 90 days in jail, followed by mandatory rehab and community service. 90 days doesn't sound like much, But for someone who had lived her entire adult life surrounded by assistance and admiration, it was eternity. Prison humbled her. Gone were the stylists, the red carpets, the filtered lenses. She spent her first week crying, her second in silence. Guards described her as polite, detached, lost in thought. One inmate later said she seemed like she didn't belong anywhere, not in here, not out there. When she was released early for good behavior, she faced a swarm of cameras waiting outside. She kept her head down, muttering only, "I just want to get well." The rehab facility was quiet, tucked away in the desert. There, for the first time, she spoke honestly about her addictions, not just to substances, but to attention. "Fame is a drug," she told a counselor, "and the withdrawal never ends." She stayed for 6 months, longer than required. When she emerged, she looked different. No makeup, hair cropped short, eyes clear but cautious. She tried to rebuild. Independent filmmakers offered her small roles, testing the waters. She took them, delivering raw performances that hinted at redemption. Critics wrote cautiously positive reviews, calling her damaged but brilliant. But the public's fascination had shifted from admiration to voyeurism. Every mistake, a missed interview, a slurred sentence, became proof that she was still broken. Redemption doesn't sell as well as collapse. Years passed. She avoided Hollywood parties, lived mostly alone, and became an advocate for addiction awareness. She visited recovery centers, speaking softly to young women about pressure and identity. "I thought fame would make me real," she told them, "but it just made me disappear." Her words hit harder than any role she'd ever played. Still, she couldn't escape her past completely. Every time she tried to re-emerge, someone would bring up that mugshot, that chase, that crash. It became part of her name. Some journalists began calling her the fallen angel of Hollywood. She hated the phrase, but it wasn't entirely wrong. There was something almost sacred in the way she destroyed herself, and then tried to piece together the fragments. One night, years later, a small film she starred in premiered at an indie festival. The audience gave her a standing ovation, not for her fame, but for her performance. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't glossy. It was raw, trembling human. When the applause faded, she stepped off stage and cried. "For the first time," she whispered, "they saw me, not the mess." Today she lives quietly in Malibu in a modest home overlooking the ocean. She paints, surfs at dawn, and avoids interviews. Her sobriety has lasted years now. Sometimes she drives past that hotel where it all ended, parks for a while, and watches the traffic go by. "It's strange," she told a friend once. "I used to chase the lights. Now I just want to sit in the dark." Her story became a cautionary tale, a parable about the hunger that fame creates and the emptiness it leaves behind. But to those who know her now, she isn't a tragedy. She's a survivor. The woman who once ran from flashing lights now finds peace in silence. The world sees her fall. She sees her freedom. In her final interview before disappearing from public life entirely, she said something that still circulates online among fans trying to make sense of her journey. "Hollywood gave me everything but myself. Jail took everything but gave me back." She wasn't just another celebrity. She was the actress of her generation. The one whose performances made audiences cry in silence. The one who could sell out theaters with a single trailer drop. Directors described her as a storm disguised as grace. She was respected, adored, even feared for how fiercely she protected her privacy. Behind that veil of mystery, though, something was festering. A life that had become too tightly wound around control, image, and illusion. And it was control, ironically, that she would lose completely. Her story began to crack during a film shoot overseas. A thriller set in Paris, months of long nights and pressure from producers who expected perfection. She was in every scene, every frame, pushed to emotional limits that blurred fiction and reality. Those close to her noticed the change first. The shaking hands, the missed calls, the glass of wine that turned into a bottle. She'd always been meticulous, professional, but now she was showing up late, dazed and strangely paranoid. The whispers began. She's not sleeping. She's using something. She's breaking. Then came the night that destroyed her. After a grueling day of filming, she got into a heated argument with her assistant. Witnesses said it started over something small, a lost phone maybe, or a forgotten appointment, but it escalated fast. The assistant, frightened, left the hotel room. Hours later, guests reported screaming from the suite next door. When security entered, they found her pacing barefoot, the room destroyed, shards of glass glittering under dim light. She was disoriented, shouting at invisible things, clutching a broken mirror. Police arrived after the hotel staff called in a disturbance. They tried to calm her down, but she lunged, not violently, but in a panicked, delusional way, convinced they were there to harm her. When they restrained her, she cried out for someone named Elliot. There was no Elliot. They found multiple prescription bottles on the table, a mix of antidepressants and sedatives. Her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. The tabloids didn't hold back. Hollywood darling loses her mind in hotel breakdown. They played the body cam footage on repeat, her face contorted, pleading, terrified. Overnight, she went from Oscar favorite to public disaster. Her agent released a statement blaming exhaustion, but the studio canceled the remaining shoot. The film, already half finished, was shelved indefinitely. She checked into a private psychiatric facility under a false name, but privacy no longer existed for her. When she finally appeared in court, it wasn't for violence, it was for possession. Investigators had found a small bag of cocaine and unprescribed pills in her suite. The judge was sympathetic but stern. He ordered probation, therapy, and regular drug testing. She nodded silently. Her once famous posture collapsed into a small, trembling frame. Her fans wanted to believe she'd recover. For a while, it seemed she might. She gave a fragile interview on a morning show, her voice calm but distant. "I lost sight of who I was," she said. "I thought being perfect meant being loved. It was heartbreaking, honest and real. But Hollywood doesn't reward honesty when the illusion is broken." She became uninsurable, too risky for studios. Scripts stopped coming. Then came the relapse. A year later, she was found asleep in her car, parked along Mulholland Drive, engine still running. Police described her as barely responsive. They found bottles again, pills, alcohol, all the old ghosts. The arrest was quieter this time, handled delicately, as if everyone knew she couldn't survive another public crucifixion. But the story leaked, as it always does. The same headlines returned, just rewritten. In rehab again, she began painting, crude, vivid shapes on large canvases. Her therapist said it was a way to externalize chaos. She painted obsessively, sometimes all night. One piece, titled Elliot, showed a faceless figure reaching toward a woman sinking into water. When asked about it, she said, "It's who I thought could save me." No one ever figured out who Elliot was, if he even existed. Some think it was a fragment of her own mind, a name she gave to the part of herself that wanted peace. The years that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. She sold her mansion, moved into a small coastal town far from Los Angeles. Occasionally, she'd be spotted in art galleries under another name, watching people look at her paintings without knowing they were hers. Her art began to sell. Critics described it as grief trapped in color. She never attended the exhibitions, but she'd send handwritten notes to the curators. "Thank you for seeing me differently." Every so often, journalists tried to find her. One did eventually. They described her home as minimalist, filled with canvases and half-empty teacups. She agreed to speak, but only off record. "People think fame destroys you," she said. "It doesn't. It erases you. You become what they need you to be until nothing's left." When the journalist asked if she missed acting, she smiled faintly. "No, acting was pretending. Now I just live." She never returned to the screen. Studios occasionally reached out, tempted by the myth of her return, the comeback of the decade. She always refused. The last known footage of her was at a beach, walking her dog, hair loose, wearing an old sweatshirt. Someone filmed her from afar. She looked content, or maybe just tired. Her downfall is still taught in Hollywood circles, as a warning about mental health, about overwork, about what happens when you build a person into a brand and forget there's a human inside. But those who knew her before the fame say she was always delicate, always too sensitive for the noise. Acting didn't break her. The applause did. When asked years later what she would tell her younger self, she paused before answering. "Don't mistake attention for love," she said. One fades. The other never came. The room fell silent. She smiled, thanked the interviewer, and disappeared again into the quiet she'd been searching for her entire life. She was the kind of woman people described in contrasts, brilliant yet volatile, warm yet unpredictable. On screen, she radiated energy, the kind that could light up a frame just by standing still. Off screen, that same energy became a storm she couldn't contain. Her rise in Hollywood had been meteoric, a breakout indie hit, a critically acclaimed drama, then the blockbuster that made her a household name. But the higher she climbed, the more fragile her world became, until the night everything fell apart on a street lined with flashing red and blue lights. Her story began in a small southern town. She'd grown up poor, the daughter of a mechanic and a waitress, with dreams too big for the place she came from. When she moved to Los Angeles at 19, she was just another hopeful, broke, nervous, sleeping in her car between auditions. But she had something that made casting directors remember her. They said she could cry on cue, laugh through pain, and make you believe it. Within 5 years, she'd gone from commercials to red carpets. Her accent softened, her name suddenly worth millions. But success came with cracks. The tabloids painted her as Hollywood's new rebel, fiery, outspoken, living fast. The truth was less glamorous. Her closest friends knew she struggled with anxiety, with insomnia, with the constant hum of expectation. She didn't know how to rest, one friend said later. She only knew how to perform. The late nights turned into late mornings. The champagne turned into something stronger, and soon her smile, that perfect camera-ready smile, began to look forced. The night of the arrest started as a celebration. Her latest movie had just premiered, and the reviews were glowing. She hosted an after-party at a hotel rooftop bar, surrounded by other actors, producers, and the kind of friends who only appear when the cameras do. Witnesses say she drank too much too fast, mixing wine with pills prescribed for sleep. Around midnight, she began arguing with her boyfriend, another actor, known for his temper. The fight moved from whispers to shouts, drawing attention from everyone around them. Someone recorded part of it on a phone, her voice breaking, his face red with fury. She threw a drink, he grabbed her wrist, and she slapped him. Security intervened, but she was already gone, storming down the stairwell barefoot. Out on the street, her anger boiled into something darker. She got into her car, engine revving, ignoring her assistant's pleas not to drive. Minutes later, security footage showed her vehicle speeding down Sunset Boulevard, weaving through traffic. At an intersection, she ran a red light and sideswiped another car. The impact sent her spinning onto the curb. The driver of the other vehicle was shaken but unhurt. She wasn't as lucky. Her airbag deployed, her face bleeding slightly, disoriented. Police arrived within minutes. They found her crying, still behind the wheel, slurring her words. The officer noted a strong smell of alcohol. When asked to step out, she stumbled, refusing a sobriety test. A small crowd began to form, phones recording every second. She shouted at them, at the officers, at herself. "You don't understand!" "I'm fine," she yelled before being handcuffed. The next morning, her mugshot spread across every entertainment site. Her PR team tried damage control, calling it a minor traffic incident. But the toxicology report told the truth. Her blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit, and the pills in her system amplified the effects. She was charged with DUI, reckless driving, and resisting arrest. The studio producing her next film immediately dropped her. Overnight, her name shifted from movie posters to court documents. The trial wasn't long. Her lawyer pushed for leniency, citing her mental health struggles and clean record. The judge sentenced her to 60 days in jail, a fine, and mandatory rehab. She served less than 3 weeks before being transferred to a treatment facility. There, away from the flashbulbs, she began to confront what she'd been running from. "I didn't crash because I was drunk," she later said. "I crashed because I was tired of pretending." In rehab, she found quiet. She journaled obsessively, describing Hollywood as a carnival where everyone's smiling through pain. She painted, read philosophy, and tried to forgive herself. When she left, she avoided interviews, retreating to her hometown. Locals spotted her jogging, volunteering at the animal shelter, or sitting in a small cafe reading scripts that never became films. A few years later, a documentary filmmaker approached her with an offer. Not a movie, but a chance to tell her side of the story. She hesitated for months before agreeing. When the film released, it wasn't the redemption piece people expected. It was raw, uncomfortable, and heartbreakingly honest. She spoke about self-destruction, loneliness, and the illusion of control. "Fame doesn't fill you," she said. "It empties you faster than anything else." The documentary earned her something she hadn't had in years: empathy. Viewers didn't see a reckless celebrity anymore. They saw a human being drowning under the weight of expectation. Slowly, work began to return. Independent directors sought her out. She didn't chase fame this time, she chased truth. Her performances became quieter, more reflective, as if she was playing versions of her former self in every role. But she never fully escaped that night. Every profile about her began the same way. With the crash, the mugshot, the breakdown. It became a permanent footnote to her name. In one of her last public statements, she said, "I accept it now." That night took everything, but it also gave me what Hollywood never did: honesty. Now she lives far from the industry. No social media, no publicist, no red carpets. Just a house by the ocean where she paints and writes letters she never sends. Sometimes fans still find her address and mail her old movie posters to sign. She signs them, but always adds the same small note at the bottom: "You don't have to be perfect to start again." Her story is one of fire and fallout, of a woman who burned too brightly for too long, until the world saw her flames as failure instead of light. But in that failure, she found something real, the kind of peace that doesn't need applause to exist. She was the industry's golden girl, a household name by 20, an Academy Award nominee by 22. Every magazine called her the face of modern Hollywood. She was sharp, witty, outspoken in interviews, and her laughter had that effortless kind of charm that made audiences fall in love instantly. But behind that laughter was someone unraveling quietly, trapped between the image the world demanded and the person she could no longer recognize in the mirror. Her career began in the whirlwind of youth and ambition. Casting directors adored her authenticity. She didn't seem like the others. She was raw, unfiltered, willing to be strange or vulnerable. That honesty made her famous. It also made her fragile. By the time she'd won her first major award, she was already surrounded by people who didn't see her as a person anymore, only as a product. Her management controlled her every move: what to wear, what to post, what to say. Her romantic relationships became gossip fodder, and her privacy evaporated in a haze of flashbulbs and headlines. The cracks began to show around her late 20s. She'd just come off a string of critically acclaimed roles, but insiders noticed her erratic behavior. Missed flights, strange interviews, unpredictable outbursts. At one press junket, she snapped at a reporter who asked about her party lifestyle. Her response: "You have no idea what it's like being eaten alive by strangers," went viral. The clip circulated everywhere, labeled as unhinged. The more the media mocked her, the angrier she became. But anger, when combined with loneliness and alcohol, becomes something darker. The incident that led to her arrest happened one summer night in Los Angeles. She was hosting a private gathering at her home in the hills. Just a few close friends, drinks, music. Around midnight, her boyfriend arrived unexpectedly. He'd been a musician, known for his charm and his temper. They'd broken up weeks before after a series of explosive arguments. According to witnesses, he'd come to talk, but the conversation quickly turned into shouting. The guests left quietly, uncomfortable with the tension. By the time the police were called, the house was a scene of chaos. When the officers arrived, they found her pacing outside, barefoot, her hands trembling. Her boyfriend was inside, bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow. He claimed she'd thrown a crystal vase at him. She claimed he'd grabbed her first. The neighbors had heard the fight and called 911. Both were intoxicated. Both told conflicting stories. But she was the one who ended up in handcuffs. Her mascara streaked down her face as she pleaded. He started it. I just wanted him to leave. The mugshot made headlines before dawn. Oscar nominee arrested for domestic disturbance. The footage of her crying as she was placed in the police car looped endlessly on entertainment news. Her publicist quit the next morning. Brands pulled endorsements. The studio canceled the press tour for her upcoming film. Within a week, she'd gone from America's sweetheart to Hollywood's pariah. The court case dragged on for months. Her ex refused to testify, but the damage was already done. She pleaded no contest to misdemeanor assault and was sentenced to probation, anger management, and community service. When she walked out of the courthouse, a reporter shouted, "Do you regret what you did?" She paused before answering, "I regret ever thinking I had to be perfect." The industry abandoned her quickly. Friends stopped calling. Producers who once begged for her attention now ignored her emails. She disappeared from social media, checked into a rehabilitation facility for stress and exhaustion, and tried to rebuild herself. There were rumors she'd moved to New Mexico, that she was painting, meditating, living simply. For years, no one heard from her. Then one day, she appeared again. Not on a red carpet, but on a small local podcast hosted by a journalist who'd once covered her early career. She spoke softly, thoughtfully about the incident. "It wasn't just that night," she said. "It was years of holding everything in. I was angry at everyone, including myself. And I broke." Her words weren't defensive. They were weary, raw, real. She talked about therapy, about forgiveness, about understanding how fame had rewired her sense of self. "I spent so long trying to be liked," she said, "that I forgot how to be human." After that interview, she began writing essays about fame, addiction, and control. One of them, titled "The Mirror Lied," went viral for its honesty. "When you grow up famous," she wrote, "you learn to smile before you learn to breathe. And when that smile fades, the world turns on you for being honest." The piece struck a chord, shared millions of times. A few years later, she quietly returned to acting, not in studio films, but in independent projects filmed in Europe. Her performances were quieter, stripped down, haunted by her past but not defined by it. Critics called it a resurrection. One reviewer wrote, "She's not performing anymore. She's confessing." She never fully re-entered the spotlight. She avoided award shows, stayed off talk circuits, and refused to discuss her arrest. "That version of me doesn't exist anymore," she said in her final televised interview. "But she taught me everything about who I really am." Today she lives in relative peace, far from Los Angeles, in a cottage surrounded by olive trees and silence. Those who visit describe her as gentle, reflective, and unashamed of her past. She paints, writes, and occasionally teaches acting to teenagers who have no idea who she once was. Sometimes she tells them, "Don't let the applause trick you. It doesn't mean love." When asked if she ever misses the red carpet, she smiles faintly and shakes her head. The carpet was red because it's soaked in blood, the blood of every soul who thought fame was freedom. And maybe that's why people still remember her, not as the actress who fell, but as the one who finally stopped pretending that she hadn't. She had once been the definition of elegance, the kind of actress whose name alone carried an air of mystery and poise. Every film she touched turned to gold, not because of the script or the director, but because of her. She had that elusive thing old Hollywood stars possessed, presence. But what the public never saw, hidden beneath the diamond gowns and the soft-spoken interviews, was the hunger that never left her. The hunger for control, for attention, for the kind of immortality only fame could promise. In her 30s, she was on top of the world. Award-winning roles, luxury endorsements, a mansion in Malibu with a view of the Pacific that looked like heaven itself. Her smile on the red carpet was rehearsed perfection, the kind of smile that could calm a storm or start one. But as her fame grew, so did the whispers. Her assistant quit without warning. A makeup artist claimed she was cruel beyond comprehension. Crew members called her difficult, demanding, paranoid. None of it stuck. Not yet. Then came the scandal that would change everything. It started small, like all collapses do, with a rumor. Someone leaked that she'd been involved in a shady investment. No one paid much attention until journalists began connecting her name to a man already under federal investigation for embezzlement. The tabloids went wild. Hollywood's darling linked to $15 million fraud scheme. She denied it immediately, but her confident denial had cracks in it. The truth was worse than anyone guessed. The man in question wasn't just a business partner. He was her boyfriend. A smooth-talking financier who had promised her the world. He'd convinced her to invest in a green energy fund that didn't exist. When it began to unravel, investigators found her signature on multiple wire transfers. She insisted she was duped, but the FBI wasn't convinced. Her accounts showed not only her involvement, but that she'd received a cut. Small, but damning. The day they came for her, it was early morning. She opened the door in a silk robe, mascara still on from the night before. The agents were polite but firm. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering." She froze, her world collapsing in real time. The cameras were already waiting outside. Someone had tipped off the press. By the time she was booked, her mugshot was everywhere. The same face that once graced perfume ads, now pale and terrified under fluorescent jail lights. Her lawyer spun it as a misunderstanding, but prosecutors called it something else. Greed wrapped in glamour. The trial was a media circus. Every detail of her lavish life, the designer handbags, the private jets, the champagne vacations, was now used as evidence of excess and moral decay. When asked if she knew the investments were fake, she paused for too long before answering. That pause was enough. She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. The day she was led away, wearing a beige pantsuit instead of couture, the judge told her, "You lived above the world. It's time you learn what it feels like to live among it." Prison broke her in ways even fame couldn't. She hated the smell, bleach and sweat and fear. She hated the noise, the loss of privacy, the way time moved like glue. She wrote letters to her publicist, begging to issue another statement, another attempt at redemption. But no one responded. Her name was toxic. The world had moved on. Months later, when she was released, she stepped out to find that no one was waiting. No fans, no reporters, just silence. She returned to her Malibu home, but it wasn't hers anymore. It had been seized and sold to pay restitution. She ended up in a small apartment in the valley. The same woman who once lived among the stars, now living among flickering streetlights and noise. She tried to work again. She auditioned, humbling herself in front of casting directors who barely remembered her. Some were kind, others condescending. "You were good once," one said. "But people don't forget." She smiled, said thank you, and walked out. She didn't get the part. Then something strange happened. A small film, low budget, almost experimental, offered her a role. Not a lead, not glamorous. Just a broken mother trying to make sense of her own mistakes. She took it, perhaps out of desperation, perhaps because it mirrored her life too closely. The film premiered quietly at an indie festival. No red carpet, no champagne, no flashing lights. Just a few folding chairs and a handful of critics. But something shifted that night. Her performance was raw, stripped of vanity, painfully human. One reviewer wrote, "It's as if she's finally telling the truth, not through interviews, but through her eyes." The film didn't make money, but it made something else: forgiveness. Over the next few years, she rebuilt slowly. Not in Hollywood's terms. There were no awards, no ad campaigns, but in her own. But those who've met her in recent years describe her as calm, almost luminous, a woman who learned peace only after losing everything. Sometimes when she's alone, she looks through old photographs, her in gowns, her on stages, her smiling with a confidence that wasn't real. She says she doesn't miss that woman, but she still keeps the pictures. "I need to remember her," she says, "so I never become her again." Which of these Hollywood downfalls shocked you the most? From luxury red carpets to cold steel handcuffs, each story reminds us how fast fame can fade, and how thin the line is between admiration and infamy. Let us know in the comments which case still lingers in your mind long after the credits roll. For more real-life crime stories that dig beneath the surface of fame, subscribe and stay tuned for our next deep dive, where trust ends and the crime begins.